For this area, we're going to be talking about common errors. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as articulation errors. It's really just a fancy way of saying mispronunciations of the sounds. That's the fancy way to say it. And there's three different types of errors that we tend to see. Omissions, meaning we're leaving a sound off of a word. Either that's the beginning or the end, maybe in the middle. Some substitutions, meaning that we're subbing one sound for another. So maybe for the word fan, we're saying ban. So we're putting that b sound in there for the f. And distortions. Distortions we tend to see sometimes where it sounds a little bit off. Maybe the speech sounds a little slushy. And sometimes they're coming the sounds out this way. That would be more of a distortion of the sound. So let's talk about some of these early developing sounds and the types of errors we might hear that's appropriate. For our k and our g, a lot of times our students find it easier to make the sounds in the front of the mouth than in the back of the mouth. So instead of saying k, they might say t. So instead of car, they might say tar. Again, it's an easier sound for them to say because it's up front in the mouth. So that's why they do that. Another one that can happen is we talked about the g. Again, easier to say it in the front, so we're going to go for do versus go. Again, we consider this age appropriate until about age 4. So not something to be really concerned about. It's just part of speech sound development. Another sound that we tend to hear a lot in error, but we're not really going to fix at this point, is that TH digraph, that th sound. A lot of our students tend to use that bite and blow sound or that d that's up front because it's easier. It's in the front of the mouth. So versus that TH digraph, they're going to do the f for Thursday. They might say duh for the when they're talking. Our s and our z can sometimes be a little difficult for our young kiddos as well. So instead of holding out that sound, these continuous sounds of s and z, it's easier for them to make one of our earlier front sounds that pop, the d, the p, the b. They're going to resort to these. So instead of sun, they might say done. They might say bun. They might say ton because it's easier for them. Same with the z. Instead of zoo, they might say do. And again, we give time for these to resolve as they're going and entering school. These are a little bit later resolving. Some of the earlier ones that also might be in error are our f and our v, our bite and blow sounds that we talked about. With those, again, they're continuous sounds. We can hold those sounds out, almost like we're singing. We can hold those sounds out. But for our students, it's easier to say those quick sounds. So instead of fan, we're going to say ban. Instead of van, we might say ban, because it's easier to say the b for our students than to hold those sounds out. It's less to think about. Another really common error that we hear with our young kids is that L, that L sound. Even though it's later developing, it tends to frequently be an error with young kids. And instead of lion, they might say wyin. Instead of little, they might say yiddle. I have a yiddle sister. But this is appropriate. And we usually give until the end of kindergarten for some of these to resolve with that ol sound. So it's common. I don't want you to think that just because you hear your child saying wyin that you need to go seek assistance. Give them time. But we do have to keep in mind that the more errors that a child does have in their speech, the more difficult it can be for them to be understood, typically by people that are not familiar to them. So mom, dad, brothers and sisters, we tend to be the translators, but it's those new people, maybe new teachers, new friends that are having more difficulty understanding. But these 2- and 3-year-olds will tend to have multiple areas that are in error. And that's okay. I have an almost 3-year-old at home, and she does have many of these errors at home. And it's just got to give it time. It's common. Many children have gone through it before. I always caution, don't try to compare too much to the siblings, because that can get us into a trap. You know, give the child time. We've talked about the time to let these sounds develop. Let them develop. But I also say that you're the parents. You're the guardians. If your gut and your instinct tells you that you feel you need a second opinion, I recommend you seek it. Some general rule of thumb that I like to give to families and to parents, to guardians: if your child's speech is noticeably less developed than peers the same age, cousins, whether that's kids in their class, and you're noticing this, that is much different, it might be worth seeking out a second opinion. Your child is showing signs of anxiety and frustration in their speech. We don't want any child to feel anxious or frustrated when they're talking and communicating. Communication is the key to successful life. And if they already have that negative feeling from a very young age, school's going to be very hard as they move in the grades, because talking is more and more required as they get older. If they're self-conscious about their speech, you see them shutting down, that they don't want to talk, you notice that they're being teased or bullied, this also might be cause for a second opinion and seeking out some assistance with these speech sounds. Or you simply want to check that nothing's wrong. You want to make sure they're on the right track. Many of us offer consultations to help you with that and give you that peace of mind. I know sometimes as parents we overanalyze and we just want what's best for our kids. And if any of these patterns of the errors that we've talked about tend to still be present at entry of kindergarten, so around 5 years of age, if you're still seeing some of these early sounds in error, that's another reason you might want to seek out some assistance. Again, just to make sure that they're on track and if they might benefit from services at this time. This is also the age that sometimes your school district might also talk to you about speech services depending on how they're developing. In our last segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about the language portion of our title, the Speech Language Pathologist. We talked a little bit about speech, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the language. And language falls into two categories: receptive language, which is your ability to understand what is said to you and interpret those things that are said to you, and expressive language, which is basically how it sounds, your ability to express yourself. And it is split into several different groups as well. We talk about and we target listening skills. And listening, of course, is very important for these speech sounds that we talked about as well. If you're unable to differentiate and hear the difference in your speech sounds, we talked about how that can impact your ability to hear words, maybe write words, and read words if you're not able to do this. Grammar skills. The grammar skills that we tend to work on are like our ing, our ing sound on the end of our verbs, our plural s, making things plural, possessive nouns and pronouns, his, hers, theirs, making sure that our students are using the accurate words as they're developing language. And this is all a learning process for them. So there is common errors, just like speech sounds, that are seen, specifically in our kindergarten age and our preschool age students, that they're going to learn these from being around other students and being around other adults. So again, you have to give it time to develop. Vocabulary skills, and learning how to recall different words and what different words mean. As we get older, learning the definitions of words as well. Their ability to ask and answer questions. If you're reading a story, are they able to tell you who was the main character, or what did that main character do in the story? Or even more simple, what did they eat for breakfast? Can they interpret those words and answer those questions? And can they ask those questions of you? What did you do over the weekend? Social language, or social communication, sometimes referred to in our field as pragmatics. Students' ability to socially interact with others. maintain topic, which doesn't always happen with young kids. They do tend to interrupt and shift, and that's normal. And some of us as adults do that as well. And there's a level of normalcy to that. Where it becomes difficult is if it's impacting their education and they're not able to stay focused in preschool or even in kindergarten. Even the rules of play, conventional rules of play that you do a lot in preschool, turn taking, sharing. Are they understanding these skills? Also things that we work on with our students. And last but not least is our literacy and our book skills. Is your child able to understand how to correctly hold the book? That the title is face up? That the book isn't upside down? Do they know how to turn the pages? Can they find words on the page? Do they recognize the numbers at the bottom of the page if there's numbers down there? Are they able to handle that book themselves? Can they point out the title? Can they point out characters? And so on and so forth. These are things we want our students to be able to do. And all of these areas are areas that we target in language therapy if there are things that are difficult for your students. I have provided several resources on the website for parents, guardians, that are easily viewed or downloaded, that lay out all of the speech sound development as well as the language development skills, and by what age we typically like to see that, or what range of ages we like to see these skills develop. Again, your gut is your best judge. If you feel that you need that second opinion, I recommend that you get it. Additionally, I have included some websites that are parent-friendly for additional information that will expand upon these videos that you've seen today, as well as some websites that have activities to promote speech and language development with your students. Some things that you can try on your own, these websites will give you before maybe you're seeking a second opinion from a professional. I have also included my contact information. If you have additional questions or concerns that you would like to reach out to me specifically, you will find that information to my website that you can email me directly if you have any other further questions or concerns. I hope that you found all of these videos to be very helpful for you and in helping your students to develop their speech and language skills.